Hello, hello, everybody. We are going to get started right on time since I know we only have a short amount of time together today. But thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to join our Lunch and Learn on being passionately successful. And for those of you who are not familiar with our organization, my name is Simone Figueroa, and I'm the president of You Thrive Educational Services, and we provide proactive mental and emotional wellness solutions to college students to help them manage stress, become more resilient, and as we like to say, not just survive, but truly thrive throughout their college experience and beyond. And I am so excited to have two of our most requested and esteemed guests back by popular demand, Dan Lerner and Dr. Alan Schlechter. They are our co-directors of curriculum development, and to my surprise, I thought that it was just going to be Dan joining us today. And I was very pleasantly surprised when Alan also popped on. The two of them are an inseparable duo, and I'm glad that they're both able to be here today. So before I turn it over to the both of them, I will just share a little bit of background information on Dan and Alan in case this is your first exposure to these dynamic gentlemen. Dan Lerner is an expert in positive and performance psychologies. He is a speaker, teacher, and strengths-based performance coach and works with students, performing artists, athletes, and executives at Fortune 500 companies and startups worldwide. Dan holds a master's in applied positive psychology from the University of Pennsylvania and spent nearly a decade on the teaching staff there. For the past 10 years, he has been a clinical instructor at New York University. Dr. Alan Schlechter is a clinical associate professor at NYU Langone Medical Center and the director of development and engagement for the Child and Adolescent Psychiatry Department, and works at the outpatient department at both Bellevue Hospital Center and NYU Langone Medical Center. Alan co-authored You Thrive: How to Succeed in College and Life, along with Dan. And together, Dan and Alan teach the most popular elective at NYU, the Science of Happiness. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Dan and Alan.
I'm
Thank you
here
so much,
because
Simone.
I would never miss Dan talking about passion. This is,
Probably because I'd be so upset with you if you did.
no, I've never not gotten something out of hearing you talk about this. And that's the last thing I will say for the next at least 20, 30 minutes.
That is what I strive for. So, Alan, I hope that you, of all the people here, get something out of it. Welcome, everybody. It's so good to have you here. Thank you, Simone. Thanks, You Thrive. Alan, thank you for joining us today. It's such a pleasure to be here. Simone mentioned Alan and I have taught the science of happiness at NYU for the past now 11 years, actually, to about 10,000 students. It's been a remarkable journey. You know, one of the things that I always like to make clear before we have these conversations is that what we teach is not happyology, right? So we don't go into something teaching only things that are positive. You have to be happy, go have good relationships. Everything has to have meaning. Everything has to be wonderful, because that's not realistic. What we do in our course is we spend, let's say 65 to 70% talking about the opportunities for well-being, the positive emotions, the relationships, the meaning, the purpose, and other topics that are related, both physical and psychological. But we also spend quite a bit of time on the challenges, the obstacles, and which something Alan focuses on as a psychiatrist: the stress, the anxiety, mental health, therapies, cognitive behavioral therapy, for example, we go into depth with. So we're going to talk about passion today, but passion sits very much at the heart, or kind of, let's say, straddles the line between these two, as we'll find out. It's not just about go find your passion. It's also what do you need to be aware of when it comes to things such as passion. It's funny, just the other day, and maybe some of you saw this, Jerry Seinfeld gave the commencement talk at Duke University, and he said, I say to hell with passion. So we will touch on that today, because passion is such a cliche, and the eminent scientist, Jerry Seinfeld, sort of misses the mark a little bit, and then he comes back and he hits it without knowing it. And that's what we're going to get into, because a lot of folks think, oh, passion is too ephemeral. You can't study it, but we have. And how do you just use that cliche? And you shouldn't. So here's a question, and I want to make sure the chat's on, because as someone mentioned, we like to do things in a really engaging way. We love to hear from people. How many people here are interested, just in general, in the idea of of happiness in their lives for themselves? So go ahead and throw it in the chat, please. We love to see that it's there. You can just say me. That's totally fine too. Yes. Thank you, Jackie. Wonderful. Thank you, Sabo. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Lindsay. This is like the easy one, right? Most, if not all people are interested in happiness. So here's another one for you. Who here is interested in the idea of success for yourselves, for your families, for your friends, for your communities? Again, Jackie, you are quick on that keyboard. Thank you. Sarah, wonderful. Lauren, thank you. Lindsay, terrific. Heather, wonderful. Julie, this is terrific. Thank you. And S, I hope you don't mind if I call you S. Thank you as well. So, right, these two things tend to be two topics that most people, if not all people, are interested in. But there's a challenge, which is that they don't go together as often as we'd like. And even trickier, when they do go together, they don't necessarily go together the way that we anticipate they will. So due to our shortened time, I'm going to try to stick mostly with the science and with actions that we can take to be able to address these things. But what we're going to be talking about is success and happiness, and how that speaks to passion. These are two things I got really interested in very early in life. And my first job out of college was as an agent, as an assistant to an agent for classical musicians right here in New York City. And it was fascinating for me. I love classical music, and I was working with opera singers. My mom was one as well. Not that I was working with her, but that's how I grew up, with an opera singing mother. And I grew up with two parents who were classical musicians. My father was in the Pittsburgh Symphony. They loved their lives. They loved what they did. They were happy people. We had a happy family. But when I got to New York, I noticed something different. We had a number of clients who were doing very, very well. Clients who were performing all over the world in major opera houses, concert halls, so on and so forth. And they seemed to be living very fulfilling lives. But we also had this other side that I hadn't seen, which were these performers who were, again, making good money, singing around the world, doing these major roles, naming lights, and they were miserable. They'd be calling at 2, 3 in the morning, say, I haven't seen my family in 6 months. I don't have a family, or I don't do anything but this, or maybe worst of all, I don't like doing this anymore. I'm miserable. And clearly we saw lots of folks in between, from the very fulfilled to the really struggling, and lots of people in between. But I saw this so frequently over the course of 10 years that I thought, I need to understand what's going on here. How can we be so successful on the one hand and so unhappy? And for those people who are successful and happy, where does happiness play in to the idea of success? So I left with one question in mind. I'm going to throw a slide up here just for a second. That question was this: when do happiness and success coexist? And first, I went to study performance psychology, basically sports psychology. A lot of people think about sports psychology. How do you get really good at things? How do you perform under stress? How do you deal with anxiety? It's like performance, stage, field anxiety. But then I went on to study, as Simone mentioned, positive psychology, or the science of positive emotions, the science of positive relationships, the science of engagement, the science of what father of the field, Martin Seligman, says, what makes life worth living. And what I started to notice very, very quickly was that it wasn't just my singers that seemed to have the sharp divide. It was people that we could see in everyday life. And so an example might be someone like Steve Jobs, right? Extraordinarily successful, changed the way that we communicate, the way that we look at the world, made one of the most successful companies, valued companies in history. But was he a happy person? Now, I don't know. I did not know Steve Jobs, but we can glean from a lot of what we've read and heard, he was not a particularly happy person. And yet, at the same time, we can contrast someone like that with someone like Sir Richard Branson, the founder and CEO of the Virgin companies, Virgin Mobile, Virgin Airlines, Virgin Music, Virgin Hotels, a man who said, I do these things because I love them, but I also make sure my family comes first, that I have hobbies that are important to me, that I spend time with. He seems to be a very fulfilled guy. So both very successful, one seemingly happy. Now, it doesn't just have to be business. I know that not everyone here is in the business field, right? It can be folks in creative pursuits. An obvious example might be someone like, again, the late, great Whitney Houston, arguably the greatest singer of our generation, certainly in her genre. But as most of us, if not all of us, know, it came to a really tragic end. This is not a person who was a happy person. And yet we can contrast her with someone like the late, great Maya Angelou, the poet laureate, the champion of women's rights and civil rights, and of so many things in our community, one of the most treasured people in our country's history. And yet this is a woman who was born into a very challenging upbringing, child orphan, beaten, abused, child drug dealer, you name it. She was facing the worst odds. And she said she rose to where she is because of the people she surrounded herself with. They were good people, a desire to give back to the community, a desire to make the world a better place. So again, both successful, one clearly not happy and one seemingly very happy. And then finally, if you want to make it quantifiable, I'm a big proponent of talking about sports because they're quantifiable. And I'll give you an example before I even put them on screen of two men who both of whom reached #1 in their shared sport. One of them started playing when he was 3 years old, playing tennis, when he had a racket duct taped to his hand, and he was driven to practice constantly, sent away at a very young age to live and practice nonstop. He would go on to be #1 in the world. He would go on to get married, go through a horrible divorce, get into drugs, and fall out of the top 150. The other would reach #1 and didn't start until he was about 14, 13 years old, taking tennis seriously. But he reached #1 and known for having a family, having a beautiful group of children, for being there with them, and sustained #1 until he retired. #1 was Andre Agassi, who had this meteoric rise and tragic fall. And #2, of course, is Roger Federer. In Agassi's autobiography, very first page, he said, "I hate tennis. I hate it with a deep, dark passion." For Federer, when he retired, he said, "I will always play this game. I love this game." So we see a group here of folks, all of whom have been enormously successful, but clearly not all of them have been happy. So we're not going to argue today that you need to be happy to be successful. We're not going to argue that clearly success brings happiness. But what we are going to talk about is a topic that lies at the very heart of all of this. And I really, as I like to say, it sits at the crossroads of happiness and success. Agassi used the word, he hates it with a deep, dark passion. And that's really important. So I'm curious, when we bring the word up here, passion, please throw it into the chat here. I fully expect, by the way, just if I'm being honest, that Jackie's going to go first. But what are the first words that come to mind when you think of passion? Just one word, boom, put it in there. Let's go. Look at that's amazing. Motivated, right? When you feel fired up about something. Yes, this is great. Thank you, Kaz. Fulfilled, wonderful, very good. What else? Desire, music. Oh, me too, Imogen, me too. Excited, wonderful. Anyone else come up? Excitement. And please, Dan, talking about passion. Alan, you're the best. Like Imogen said, by the way, feel free to throw a topic out there if there's something you're passionate about. Fire, yes, absolutely. Sparked, yes, that's a dad joke. Buy the slide. So art, wonderful. All right, I love this. This is so good. Now, all of these seem to be really positive things. Is passion always a positive thing? And please throw it in the chat. We'd love to hear. And feel free to just say no, or feel free to say when passion might not be. Jackie, I'm a little disappointed. There she is. Okay. You can be passionate about negative concepts. Yes, you can. That's right. Some passions can be unhealthy. Absolutely. Absolutely. Not when the thing about which we're passionate isn't going well, right? To hate with a passion, that's really good. Thank you, S. That's it, right? I mean, we can be passionate about hurting other people. That is not something we want to promote. We can be so passionate that they distract us, right? About negative concepts. So what we're talking about here is what the science has been showing. Passion, basic, an intense desire or enthusiasm for something. That's our definition here. And per the research, it's something you want to spend about 8.5 hours a week on. But what you're illustrating here so beautifully is the idea. It's come from Bob Vallerand. Robert Vallerand was he's been researching passion for about 40 years at the University of Montreal. He was the former president of the International Positive Psychology Association, terrific researcher. And he and his colleagues have found there are two very distinct ways to pursue a passion. One, and illustrated by the first answers that you offered, was harmonious. I think it's a terrific word because, as we'll find in a moment, it's passions that work in harmony with the rest of your life. And we'll explore those in a second. But the other way, as you just colored in here, was an unhealthy way. And it's what he and the field deem obsessive passion. Now, we all know what obsession is, but we're going to walk through that too to see what that looks like. So what I want to do here is walk through what passions look like when they're harmonious and obsessive. And to really ground this, to give it context, you may want to take a moment and think about either something you are passionate about. By the way, if you don't have a passion, that's okay. We're going to talk about that and how you can nurture one. But if you have a passion, to put that in front of your mind and start using these next data points to pin where you might be. And if you don't feel you have a passion yet, think about someone you might know who is passionate about something and see how you might identify them. So when it comes to passions, harmonious passions are the foundation of a harmonious passion is very clear, right? You do it because you love it. And this may seem somewhat obvious, but let's talk about it through the lens of, say, a 4-year-old, right? How many people here have children, by the way? If you want to throw it in the chat, just curious. Me with double caps, I'm guessing that is multiples children, and they are probably maybe young, and that's the capital M-E. Alan has 2, I have 1. Who else here has kids? Anyone else here have kids? 1 teenager. Oh, that's like 7 children. A 31-year-old. Congratulations on making it through, but college age, and congratulations on them moving on. And a cat. That counts. That counts. So if you don't have kids, you've been one. So you'll identify with these things. Think about 4-year-olds. When you were 4 or when your kids were 4, we get up when we're 4 years old and we're like, boop, time to play with Legos. Boop, time to play piano. Boop, time to go outside and play baseball. Boop, time to read a book. Boop, time to finger paint. Whatever it is, we get up and we're like, let's go. Like, I'm doing this because I want to do this. And that's a wonderful way to kick off. And it's obvious when it comes to 4-year-olds because they don't have many responsibilities, right? They even go to kindergarten. They're like, oh, I want to play with the blocks. Nope, I want to play with the finger paint. So, we do something because we really look forward to it. But obsessive passions are different. We do them for others or status or glory or money. Now, I'm not saying that a 4-year-old wakes up and thinks, how am I going to make $1 billion today? That's not necessarily where they go. But what might start happening to a 4-year-old or to a 6-year-old or to an 8-year-old when we're kids is we're outside doing what we love. We're playing wiffle ball. And we hear our mother or father call us in. Hey, Alan, time to come in and practice piano. And we're like, and I go in, you're like, this is not what I want to do. And you sit there and you watch the clock because you have to practice for 15 minutes. And the second it's over, you're out of there. And if you project that 20 years into the future, you're sitting at a desk. And if you're doing something you love, you're not staring at that clock. You're really into it and you're doing your thing, right? If it's work, right? But for a lot of folks, they're looking at the clock. And the second it hits quitting time, they're out, right? It's just not something they're enjoying. Now, I have a lot of friends who are in the finance industry, and a number of them work at a very well-known finance firm. I won't name it. I'll just say it. It rhymes with old man snacks. How's that? Or we can call it old man snacks, if that makes it a little more obvious. And it's interesting because people, they don't hate what they do. Don't get me wrong. A lot of them enjoy what they do, but most of them do it. And I'm like, why do you work there? And they're like, look, man, the money's amazing. I work at Old Man. Like, it's cool, and people think it's cool, but they don't do it because they love it. And they might have other things they do love on the side, but there's not a whole lot of time for other things. But I do have a couple of friends, one in particular who works there. And when I asked him why, and he's been there for 21 years, what is it that you love about Old Man? And, he said, Dan, man, I'm a math geek. I went to MIT. Like, I take such joy in getting math problem sets And yes, there's red tape. Yes, there's politics at the firm, but most of my job is doing something that I love to do, which is figuring out math puzzles. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. It's a very different reason to be doing this, right? So this is the foundation of our passions. Now, if you want to think about other markers that Valorant and colleagues have discovered, think about your life like a pie chart, right? If your pie chart of life, work, family, hobbies, other things, friends, relationships, away from your family, if your passion is part of that multicolored pie chart, you might be looking at harmonious passion. But for obsessively passionate people, it's one color. Now, don't get me wrong, you're not spending 24/7 at work, or you're not spending 24/7 on the tennis court, if that would what your passion is. It does not have to be work related. But you might be spending 24/7 cooking or in your garden or reading a book. But when it's obsessive, if you're not, it's still there. You're still thinking about it. So I work with students at places like Juilliard, which is right up the street from right here where I live. And you can tell pretty quickly, because you have these pianists can practice for hours on end, and you get to say noon, and they've been in their practice studios for 3 hours, and someone will go, "Oh my gosh, look at that! It's lunchtime. I've been at it for 3 hours," and they go to someone else's practice room, and they knock on the door. "Hey, you want to go get a slice?" And the other person goes, "Oh, where'd the time go? Yes, let's go." Okay, if they're leaving, they could talk about a date they went on last night, a movie they saw, a book they're reading, maybe the music they're doing, but it's not sticking in the practice room. Other people, "Hey, you want to come get a slice?" And they look at they're like, no, I can't. I have a competition in 2 weeks. I have to keep going. I have to keep going. I can't stop. I can't stop. And the next day, "Hey, you want to come get a slice?" "No, I can't stop. I can't stop." And they don't stop. And even if you get them out, even if you can get them out of their practice rooms, they're might be with you physically, but they're not with you psychologically. Right? They're not mindful. They're not present. They're thinking, "I should be in the practice room. I should be in the practice room. I can't believe I'm not there." So whether or not you take time away to be with your family, are you sitting there at the dinner table thinking about something else? That could be an obsessive passion, as opposed to being able to leave it and move on. Now, the last two, I'll use my Juilliard folks again. You know, they love playing piano, and let's say they get to that competition and they come in second. And this has happened. I've had some of these clients go, "Yeah, I came in second. I worked really hard, but you know what? The person who won, they were really good, and I worked as hard as I could. And you know what? Now I get to go back to the practice room, and I get to keep doing something I love." This is a more harmonious thing, right? I love learning. I love playing it. But the obsessives, if they come in second, I have literally heard, "I hate playing piano. I can't believe I have to do this. Now I have to go back and get even better in my practice room." And you're like, wow, you're 20 years old. Like, this is going to be a rough road. So, it's about being the best, about beating everyone. It's not about being your best. It's about being the best. And that makes a big difference too. And generally, with a harmonious passion, you're in control. I can put my tennis racket down. I've used tennis. Alan and I love tennis. We play together. I can put the racket down. I can stop. I can stop cooking. I can stop reading. I can say it's time to do something else. I can stop doing my work because I love my work, but it's like, time to put that away, right? As opposed to controlling you. You have no say. You have no choice. There is nowhere to go. Now, let's look at a couple of examples, right, that might bring it to light. Here's Steve Jobs, who we talked about before. You have to have a lot of passion for what you're doing because it's so hard. I have no problem with the statement. Passion does not imply that things are going to be easy. More likely it implies that you're going to push through tough stuff. But it's really the second half of this statement that makes the difference. If you don't, any rational person would give up. So what is Jobs saying here about people who have passion? What do they need to be? And please feel free to throw it in the chat if you'd like to. Jackie, man, you were quick. Have a lack of balance. That's right. Yeah, you can't be rational. You have to be a little off, right? Which he was, and look, if that is who he was, I'm not going to say everyone has the same balance, but this implies you have to be irrational. And then we can look at someone like this, who we contrasted him with before. There's no greater thing you can do with your work in life and your work than follow your passions. Now, as I've said many times, if Branson showed up to a commencement speech at NYU where Alan and I teach, and this is what he said, and then he went, Thanks for having me. See you later. I'd be like, wait a second, you paid this guy money to come give this talk with this kind of cliche, right? But it's what he says to follow up that makes the difference. He says in a way that serves the world and you, not just you, but the world around you. And this is a big difference. It's about what am I giving back in addition to what am I getting for myself? And this is when I go back to Jerry Seinfeld. I say the hell with passion. Pursue the things that fascinate you. Well, what might that look like? Because granularly, he's right. On the whole, he's wrong. Let's look at one more really fun study. It's Sports Illustrated study. It proposed the following. You're offered a banned performance-enhancing substance that comes with 2 guarantees. This was to Olympic and professional level athletes. Guarantee number 1, you will not be caught. Guarantee number 2, you will win every competition you enter for the next 5 years. All right. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. There's more. There it is. And then you will die from the side effects of the substance. Just to be clear here, that's kind of an important factor. What percentage of athletes said they would be willing to take a drug where they won every time and then they would die from the side effects? Any guesses? Again, throw it in the chat if you'd like to. 40%, 75, 80, 60. Right. This is you're spot on here because Sports Illustrated, not a noted research journal, but what they said was that more than 50% of the athletes said yes. Now that is a huge number, right? And that is indicative potentially of obsessive passion because you always want to win. And yet we have someone like who I think is the greatest athlete alive, Simone Biles, saying people think you have to be serious to do a good job, but I think if you're having fun, you can do better. And the research would bear that out, right? Because when we look at a research, again, this is Valorand on college students in a theater program, looking at harmonious and obsessive passion, and then looking at deliberate practice, essentially the way that we get better, which is incredibly hard work. You might know the 10,000 hour theory, that's deliberate practice. Constantly grinding, constantly pushing, very focused, small goals. What is the obvious choice in terms of who's more likely to really, really grind at these things? Right? Well, most people would say it's obsessive passion, and they'd be wrong, right? It's actually harmonious passion. It allows us to get feedback. It allows us to think and process and still work hard, but ultimately to be able to not only get greater subjective well-being, but also greater objective performance, right? So when we pursue passion in a harmonious way, we tend to go through a process that gets us better. And when we look at the outcomes of harmonious passion, we do feel happier and more fulfilled. Now, this is kind of a no-brainer. Of course, obsessive passion would be you have more negative emotions, but we're not talking about when you're doing your passion, not when you're playing tennis or when you're teaching or when you're at work or when you're cooking. They tend to bleed out or color the rest of our lives. So when we look at college basketball players who are assessed as having a harmonious passion for the sport, it's not just that they enjoy practice more in the morning, it's that the rest of their day is better. They rate their classes as better, their meals is better, their interactions with friends is better, as opposed to the folks who are obsessively passionate in Division I basketball. They don't enjoy practice in the morning, and the rest of their day when they have practice is worse. They rate all the things I mentioned as lower. So having a passion can color the rest of your life. Now, people with harmonious passion tend to enjoy better relationships. They're rated as less likely to lie, cheat, or steal at the workplace, even if their passion is not at work. So it leads in. It colors the way that we interact with people, as opposed to the obsessives, where we feel guilty or we show more self-destructive behavior. Valorand looked at Olympic level cyclists. He looked at yoga practitioners and professional ballet dancers, found that there were more long-term and short-term injuries. But it wasn't for obsessively passionate people because they never stop, they never rest. But it's also psychological. Much higher levels of guilt, much lower levels of agency, lower levels of self-confidence. All of these different things we assume will come with just be good, and they tend to drop, right? Even yoga practitioners, they feel guilty for not being in the studio, and they do get injured more often because they never give their bodies a rest. So there are lots of different negatives here. And look, with harmonious passion, we're energetic and focused. And Alan and I teach about positive emotions in class and the effect that priming of positive emotions have, which include energy and focus. But with obsessive passion, we're far more likely to burn out. And as I always say, this is my nightmare. You go and work 10,000 hours really hard at something, and you get there and you wake up and you're like, I am amazing at this, and I really don't want to do this anymore. And that can be a really scary thing. And yet we find is in most cases, not all, but most cases, there's equal likelihood of mastery because we have brought in things that minimize our stress, like relationships and friendships and time to breathe and do other things, as opposed to obsessive, where we go, 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 and we might master it, but there's a really good chance we're going to burn out. So we began this with a question, and I know we're running at time. I want to make some time for Q&A. When do happiness and success coexist? Wow, look at that spelling. Sorry about that. Forget it. And these were our players, right? I think we should answer this question, especially because I want to get this text off the screen. And the answer would be something like this. It depends on how you define success. Come on back. And if you define it as nothing but winning, you can go after anything you want. Nothing but being the best, you can go after any way you want. But we've seen the folks on the bottom kind of disappear. Jobs left us too early. The tragic end of Whitney Houston. And Agassi, who dropped to the 180s. But I want to leave him up here just for 1 second. And I don't have the picture here. But Agassi, after dropping into the 180s, after his very public divorce from Brooke Shields, he remarried Steffi Graf, another tennis player. And they had kids. And he came back. And he rose up to be number one again. He discovered a love of tennis again. But he also was spending a lot of time with his family. He raised almost $50 million to start a school for underprivileged kids out in Nevada. He gives back to his community, and he's playing again now. So just because we might have gone there doesn't mean that we can't come back up. Right? With that, I want to be able to have some time for Q&A and just say thank you for everyone for being such a part of this and attending today. But please bring some questions my way in the minutes that we have remaining.
Yeah, so thank you, everybody. We want to be respectful of your time, and we know we allotted 30 minutes. So if you need to drop off, go for it. But Alan and Dan and I will be sticking around if you have questions. Just a quick few announcements. I'm super excited to share that we are launching a new topic module on passion this summer. Yay. So if this is something that you want to learn more about how to bring to your students, kind of sneak peek behind the curtain, we are hosting a learning lab this coming Tuesday, the 21st at 1 p.m. I'll drop a link in the chat. We'd love to see you there. You can kind of see how we can apply some of the amazing information Dan shared about harmonious obsessive passion with students directly. And yeah, I'll leave it for questions.
First of all, I just want to say thanks to all of you for the thank yous and for being here as well. And I do see some questions here, right? So as well as a link to the program this summer, which is going to be super exciting. Jackie, not a surprise, you're the one asking the first question. How can you help others find their passion? So that's a great question. People tend to think that passions are these thunderbolt moments, right? Like I'm walking down the street, I see someone in dire need of assistance, and I realize this is my life's work. I need to go to medical school, or I need to become a therapist, or I need to help the homeless, like boom, like that. And that very rarely happens. In less than 10% of the cases, it's thunderbolt moments. The way that passion, and then this, coming back to Seinfeld, this is where Seinfeld was right. He said, not interest, he said, find things that fascinate you. So the way that most passions tend to begin is with a spark, right? That is to say, Alan and I had a student class about 8 or 9 years ago. And look, we have 500 students in our classroom, so we don't get to meet everyone. We try to, but we don't get to. And we did not get to meet this young woman. And she came back. She had been a first-year student. She came back her senior year and said, I was a theater major. And I came to your class and I found it so interesting. I decided to take Psych 101. And that was so interesting that I took another psych class and then another psych class. And I changed my major. And I am about to graduate and go to grad school for psychology. And that's such like a textbook thing, right? For passion, which is, oh, that's interesting. I think I'll take a class. So if you like to cook, do not quit your job and open a restaurant. Like that's not my recommendation. Take a cooking class. You might find yourself taking an advanced cooking class and then maybe something in the restaurant industry class before you go on. A student comes to me and says, I want to learn French. I'm not like, move to Paris. I'm like, take French 101. If you still like it, take another one. So the things that draw our attention can be really good guides. And so when you're talking to someone, so just look at the way you phrase this question, Jackie, how can you help others find their passion? That's one of the questions is, what are the things that you enjoy doing, right? You enjoy playing tennis? Take some lessons. Do you enjoy gardening? Start a little garden for yourself, a little one. Don't leave and, go major in agriculture, right? So it's the little things, and they tend to add up. And they tend to build into those passions. Passions, in the research we find, take on average about 3 years to develop. So when my son was young, he loved gymnastics, loved it, and he was going as many times as he could a week, and 4 days a week, and then an hour and a half a day when he was 5. And people would ask him, "What do you do?" He says, "I do gymnastics." About 3 years into it, when he was doing 5 days a week, 4 hours a day, and he was sort of on the Olympic development track, people would ask him the same question, and he said, "I am a gymnast." Went from "I do gymnastics" to "I am a gymnast." And we see those kind of things. We start to identify, but it takes a little while longer. A lot of people are impatient these days. I think especially college students. They come to college thinking, "I should have had a passion already coming into this. I've already failed," or "I need to find it immediately." So they find it a great relief. And Alan and I both heard this from so many students. When we tell them, it starts with a spark. Think about the things you're interested in. Maybe apply your character strengths. It's another topic, but the things that our values, our strengths of character. But really, what are you interested in? Take a class. And it's going to take a while to develop into that passion. But that tends to be it.
Dan, I'm really curious for you to talk. Every time you give this talk, Dan, I think of something else. How do you help people shift from obsessive passion to harmonious passion? What are the questions you ask them to get them to shift over?
So let me respond to that in a second. I want to make sure I answer Michael's too. Just really quickly, and just maybe just respond to that, because I really appreciate it. It sounds like, Michael, your teacher. You teach the importance of finding a passion versus simply choosing a major, right? That's such a beautiful way to do it. And I imagine, Michael, that the way you do it is very effective. For other folks who are hoping to do what Michael's doing, I think about that question again, which is, passion can weigh heavy, right? I need to find this. What are you interested in? Let's just take those steps, right? Because choosing a major, you're like, meh, I guess I'll go into that. And all of a sudden you get stuck on that track, depending where you go to school, right? I mean, there's certain colleges that allow for lots of exploration, but certain colleges and universities where it's like, oh, you're majoring in that. We need to know first semester freshman year. Okay, now you can't change it, right? And that can be really rough. So I love that advice, Michael. As for obsessive passion, the literature is still emerging. It's a great question, but I think I would want to. One of the challenges I have with a lot of research is that it is often too all-encompassing, phrased that way. So we hear that optimism is good, as an example. Yeah, optimism can be good in many situations for many people, but there are times where pessimism is actually better, and for people where pessimism is more effective. So to give a blanket statement like I am optimistic or must be, right? That can be really not only ineffective but damaging. So when we look at obsessive passion, it's really important to understand it's not black and white. There's lots of gray area in between, right? So people can be very obsessive and very harmonious, but some people can be moderately moderately harmonious or moderately obsessive, right? And all the way sort of to that balance. I'm not going to say, you can't say one is automatically good or automatically bad. It depends on the individual too. But the way that I think about obsessive passions is that I think there is room for us to be obsessively passionate for manageable periods of time. So if you're sitting there thinking, but Dan, sometimes I get so obsessed with a project that for a week or 2 or even a month, I'm like, I am totally immersed. But then I come out of it. Is that okay? And I think it depends on your life, and your family's understanding, your friends' understanding. Fundamentally, and in general, I tend to think that yes, if there's a light at the end of the tunnel and you can really manage that, okay. There are times where I will say to my family, when Alan and I wrote the book, I was classically obsessively passionate about it. It's all I thought about. Nothing else existed. And I came out of that experience thinking I never want to do that again. So now I've done this a few times, a number of times, past few years, when I'm working on a big project. I go around like a shack in Connecticut, like just somewhere that's not too far away, that's not expensive. I look at my family, I'm like, I love you guys so much. I gotta leave for 4 days. And I go and I place myself there, and then I come back. I think a more manageable way is to say to your family, these next 2 days, I have to work incredibly hard at this, or this next week, I'm really kind of not going to be here if you can't get out of town, or I won't be back until 9 or 10 at night. But this is only for a week. And then at the end of that week, okay. And I know Alan does that too. There are times where Alan's just full on charging, and then he hits the weekend and he's like, clearing the decks, family only. But you give your family the heads up, you say it out loud so you understand it. What we have seen in the literature about making that switch includes changing, adding non-negotiable periods of things that you look forward to doing. So let's say you find yourself obsessively passionate about work. What's the first thing that you miss? Is it family? Is it friends? Is it working out? Is it meditating? What is that one thing that if you could have one thing that you really could get back into? And so then you start scheduling those. I'm going to take a half an hour to meditate Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, right? 3 times this week. Or I'm going to take an hour to work out 4 days this week. Or I'm going to make sure that 3 days this week, I get home for dinner. Or 4 days this week, I get home for dinner at 6 o'clock. It's really hard because we're obsessively passionate. So there are 2 suggestions that I make to accompany this non-negotiable rescheduling. One is incorporate somebody else. If you're already finding it tough to leave work, tell a friend you will meet them at the gym. Meditate with a friend or your partner or your kids. Schedule time if you missed your friends to have coffee with a friend, because you're far less likely to cancel. The other thing I suggest, and I don't have evidence to this, but I think it's adjacent to a lot of the research in other fields, is take some time after you've done that, after you've met with your friend, after you've gone to the gym, after you've meditated, take 5 minutes and write down the reason that you are grateful that you took that time. How do you feel about that? Go in depth, right? How do you feel differently now? How did that help you? Why do you look forward to the next time you do that? Because it allows us time to process, as opposed to just, okay, I meditated, back to work, in which case the impact is lessened. So I would say, A, not all obsessive passion is the same. There can be room for obsessive passion in small doses. B, schedule non-negotiable opportunities for you to enjoy the number one thing you miss. Bring people into the process if you can, and take a little time to reflect, maybe in a journal as well, to really start to help it sink in. There we are. Anyone else have any questions at all? I know that some people have to go, and again, as Simone said, I totally want to respect that, but figure I'm here, might as well answer some questions if you have them. You're welcome, Jackie. Thank you. Oh, you're muted. You're muted.
Man, you'd think that after all this time on Zoom that, those kind of technical errors, you wouldn't make them anymore. But I have to say, thank you both so much. It's always such a pleasure having you join us in our community. And this was such a wonderful way to kind of launch our new topic module on passion, to share this with our community, this topic. And yeah, thank you everybody for the time. And we look forward to seeing you at our next Thought Leadership series. And with that, have a great rest of your day, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you for all the wonderful chats and all the thank yous. It is our pleasure. Have wonderful days, and we look forward to seeing you again. We appreciate you.